Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Deering, and I'm the president of the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. And it's my pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Fred Smaller and Dr. Mike Moodian, both of Chapman University, who will be talking to us tonight about Orange County's political divide and what their research reveals. We are pleased to have you here as our audience. I'd like to thank Pat Leftwich for doing the Zoom. I'd like to thank Alan Feldman for doing the timing. And I'd like to thank Pat also for asking the questions at the end. Doctors Smaller and Moodian will talk for about 25 minutes and then we'll have Q&A. But first, we have a very brief moment of reflection, and Jean Lepowski, our field organizer, will do that for us. Thank you, Jean.
James Arthur Baldwin was born in 1947, died in 1985. He's an American novelist, playwright, and essayist, and a poet and an activist. He was a brilliant man, prolific writer. He authored many important works that continue to resonate with people today. If you have not had an opportunity to read anything he has written, you really should. You can find a list of his works on his entry on Wikipedia, or you can go to the library and search his name. There's a lot of material available. There's also a documentary that was released in 2016 about Mr. Baldwin based on one of his unfinished works. It is entitled, I Am Not Your Negro. It was directed by Raoul Peck. What I'd like us to do is consider one of the quotations from Mr. Baldwin. Okay, so he says, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced.
Thank you, Jean. Those are very important words for all of us to think about, because there are definitely things that this country and that we as a people have not faced. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Professors Fred Smaller and Mike Moodian. Fred Smaller is a professor, associate professor of political science at Chapman. He directs Chapman's annual local government conference, and in 2018, he released a book called From Kleptocracy to Democracy: How Citizens Can Take Back Local Government. Mike Moodian also teaches at Chapman in the Leadership Studies program, and he's an associate professor of social science at Brandman University as well. He is one of Governor Jerry Brown's appointees to the California Commission on Judicial Performance. Together, Professors Smaller and Moodian publish an annual OC survey, which asks OC residents about local, state, and national issues. And now they will tell us about their 2020 survey and give us a little background as well. Welcome, Dr. Smaller and Moodian.
Well, Sue and Jean and Pat, thank you so much for inviting Mike and I to present to the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. 88% turnout is an extremely high number, and thank you for your civic engagement. We have just 25 minutes, and telling professors who are used to speaking for 75 minutes, this is tough, but we have a lot of good information and we want to convey it. Let me just start with this. Those of us who've been around a while know Orange County's reputation for the place Ronald Reagan said good Republicans go to die, for being the home of the John Birch Society, very conservative Congress people, John Schmitz, Bob Dornan, Bill Dannemeyer. Even our airport is named after John Wayne, though Mike and I have tried to face that and change it. But in any case, we are going to talk tonight about change and the changes that have taken place in Orange County and where we are today. So the biggest change is, and I got here in '83, and there was no Democratic Party. And in fact, as a professor at Chapman in '83, I wasn't referred to as Dr. Smoller, but in fact was called the Democrat, which was quite a chagrin because the Board of Trustees was all Republicans, and it was not always pleasant. But something has happened, and you can see from this very telling graphic that the registration in Orange County used to be referred to as Red County, and that just simply isn't true anymore. And in 2019, Democrats had more registration, and every day since, more and more people are registering with the Democratic Party. And now the Democrats have a 50,000 vote registration advantage over the Republicans. And we'll talk about why that is. But the most important change is that we are no longer Red County. We're not really Blue County. Mike and I believe we're Purple County, and that we've become more competitive. So before we get to our survey results, we'll just say, let's just take a quick look at what's happened. In 2016, Hillary Clinton, for the first time in 80 years, took Orange County. More people voted for her than for her competitor, Donald Trump. That was 2016, 2018, there was what was called the Blue Wave, which washed across our political shores, and every single congressional office became blue, and the Republicans didn't have any representation. 2019 was when the Democrats overtook the Republicans. 2020, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by twice the percentage that Hillary Clinton. And then we saw some other victories in November 2020. Newcomer Dave Min, a UCI law professor, beat Senator Republican stalwart John Morlock, who is, one of the titans of Orange County Republicanism. And then Josh Newman, who had been previously recalled, beat Ling Chang. And Democrats also, we saw the incumbent Cotty Petrie Norris, who is your assemblywoman, was able to fend off Newport Beach Council member Diane Dixon in the 74th district. These are major changes. Just to go on a little more, in Irvine, which now has a solid Democratic registration advantage, Farrah Khan, beat longtime Republican conservative Christina Shea by nearly 12 points. This was incredible. And Larry Agrin, who's a warhorse from the Democratic Party, a Democrat, had been defeated earlier, and he went back on the council. Recently in 2021, Katrina Foley again beat John Morlock. So Morlock lost twice in 4 months, and others to win a seat on Board of Supervisors, which is still 3-2 Republicans. But for the longest time, it was always 5-0 Republicans. And then I won't get into too much here, but there are 8 cities in Orange County that account for more than half the people in Orange County. And a big chunk of them, Anaheim, Santa Ana, Irvine, Huntington Beach, those are the cities, but Santa Ana, Irvine, Fullerton, Costa Mesa now have Democratic majorities. Orange, Garden Grove, and Anaheim have Republican, but the others, we see Huntington Beach is split among 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And the school boards have also, the majority of the people who sit on school boards are Democrats. And this matters because these low ballot offices like school board become springboards for people who are going to run for city council and then ultimately for Congress and other things. The Republican Party is not dead, and that's why we call it competitive county. Michelle Steele beat incumbent Congress member Harley Reuter, and Young Kim defeated incumbent, obviously, Congress member Gil Cisneros, and Stephen Choi, the assemblyman, also beat, he fended off a very tough competition from Irvine Council member Melissa Fox. So we believe there's evidence of strength on both sides. And so we are in purple competitive county. And so Mike, I'm sorry, did I miss something? We were going to comment about the, I'm sorry. Let's see this. I'm sorry. Mike, did you want to talk about the survey?
Sure, Fred, can you just go back? This is perfect.
Yeah.
So I just would like to echo Fred's comments. Thank you very much, Laguna Woods Democratic Club, for having us today. We're going to transition now and talk about our research and what we found. And Fred and I, for a little more than a decade, have conducted an annual public opinion survey on Orange County. We have done it 4 consecutive years, and then we did our first one in 2010. So there was a little gap after 2010, and then due to some funding, we've been able to conduct this for 4 consecutive years. And so there have been some really fascinating results that we have found. A little bit of background about the most recent study. We conducted it earlier this year. We had a sample size of a little bit more than 700 individuals, 700 adults. Fred and I constructed this survey, and we hired a firm out of Texas who conducted all of the phone calls. They called thousands of Orange County residents until they reached a representative sample of the county. And we conduct this every spring, and we present the findings at a public policy conference that we put together each spring. So if we go to the next slide, Fred, what I'd like to do right now is share with you a little bit about county residents' views toward different issues. We're going to start with Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about the state of California and Orange County and policing and Black Lives Matter and other movements. First order of business. We see a lot in the newspaper with a lot of, for lack of a better term, noisy people in Orange County, Huntington Beach, and at the Board of Supervisor meetings and elsewhere, who oftentimes make the news about, for example, maybe the most recent presidential election being stolen or cheating that might have occurred. Our research tells us a different story. There is a strong majority of county residents who believe the most recent presidential election was conducted fairly. So while noisy people tend to make the headlines, Fred and I, time and time again, find that there is this reasonable silent majority that exists in Orange County. The other thing that Fred and I started to, one thing that led us to believe that there would be a blue wave in 2018 is we noticed that Donald Trump's approval rating was low in Orange County. And a majority of people in OC believe that Trump will go down as a below average or a poor president. And again, if you look at registration numbers and that the no party preference voters also tend to trend alongside Democrats on issues such as this. Early in his presidency, Biden has a high approval rating, but overall, residents are split in terms of the direction that the country is going. And also Congress has a low approval rating as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a story that the LA Times did after interviewing Fred, and it was based on our survey question about the Gavin Newsom recall. And Fred, I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and chime in on this one, Fred, just given time. This was a very interesting finding, but Fred, if you could share our finding here on the Newsom recall.
Well, there was a lot of talk about Newsom's recall, but we were one of the first to report that in what was considered very conservative Orange County, the recall was failing. And that has now become a dominant theme that it is highly unlikely that the governor will be recalled, even though you'll see a lot of activity for that in Orange County. If you can't win Orange County and the numbers say that it's yes 48 and no 52, you're not going to win the state. And George Skelton wrote that piece about a month or so ago.
And again, this is OC, which used to be a hotbed for the Save Our State movement during the Pete Wilson era. This was once a hotbed for the John Birch Society. Here, there is not widespread support for the Newsom recall in OC. Only 48% believe that Newsom should be recalled. So if we can go to the next slide, Fred. The other thing that we do is we ask Orange County residents every year what they believe the biggest problems are facing Orange County. For the 4th consecutive year, housing affordability / homelessness landed in our top 3. And I believe it was first every single year. That is the number one concern in the minds of county residents, the fact that it's very expensive to live here. And I would imagine that when we do this next year, I can envision that possibly being up there again, given the skyrocketing costs of real estate. Jobs and the economy were number 2. Usually traffic lands in our top 3, but this year the coronavirus pandemic took the place of traffic for obvious reasons.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We also ask a series of questions about climate change. I will just give you the short explanation for this. When we first did our countywide survey in 2010, the discussion then among county residents was whether climate change was even real and whether humans were responsible for it. That train has left the station. That's no longer the debate. This is now a county that acknowledges that climate change is a threat, that it's a serious problem. And there is also support for many of California's ambitious climate change goals, such as new cars, zero emission vehicles being sold completely in 2035, and the state's renewable energy sources goals by 2045. We find among county residents, there's no longer this debate in terms of whether it's real, whether humans are the cause. Now it is, yes, it's real. And now the debate is on solutions for it. If we go to the next slide. We also asked some questions on Black Lives Matter and on policing in Orange County. And I was in high school when the Rodney King verdict came in the early 1990s. I was at Santa Margarita Catholic High School. And Orange County was very quiet in the aftermath of the not guilty verdicts for the police in the Rodney King trial. And what I noticed is last year, it was much, much different in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. And I noticed that there were marches and there were protests everywhere throughout Orange County, even in conservative South Orange County. And our findings are that the majority, 65%, support the Black Lives Matter movement. However, there is a significant divide between Republicans and Democrats in responding to this question. Also, while policing has been a source of discussion in major metropolitan areas in the United States, such as Minneapolis and the Bay Area and elsewhere, we did find that there is general high support for policing in OC. It's not as controversial an issue in Orange County, with the exception of policing and the handling of the mental health crisis in OC. That is the one question that we asked. And as we see on the slide, we attribute this to the history of issues we've had here with Kelly Thomas in Fullerton and some other issues. But generally, policing in Orange County have high marks. If we go to the next slide, Fred. And the other finding that we have, and we're going to turn it over to Fred in a moment, is that, and this goes back to our survey last year as well, and we've been seeing these trends these last couple of years, and that is that as the county is changing and as registration numbers are changing in the county, we're seeing a general support for a lot of issues that tend to be aligned with the Democratic Party. Support for gun control, support for environmental protection, the gap between the rich and the poor, and concern there, a legal path to citizenship for individuals in this country. It's much, much different. And this change has happened pretty quickly too. Much different results from our first survey back in 2010. If we go to the next slide. And now Fred is going to share our findings on coronavirus in Orange County.
Well, obviously, we asked several important questions about the coronavirus. The coronavirus was one of our top 3 most important issues, and it has been devastating to our county. 250,000 cases, 5,000 deaths, major disruptions. Our entire lives have been disrupted with school and shopping and everything. And it has also caused a major division. And we wanted to focus on this, and it's become quite relevant in recent days. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. There was pardon me for the slides. One of the things that's taken place is that about last week, the County Board of Supervisors considered a proposal to have what's called an online system for verifying people's vaccine status. And this has caused a number of people to fill that chamber and to protest widely against it. And this has been a very nasty time for our Board of Supervisors. But what is significant is that there was real change. The board actually decided to table the motion. And so the point is, we have to celebrate free speech, but now a small group of people were actually influencing public policy. And when you start to actually influence public policy, you are crossing a line. And the other thing is that as this article shows, the county has been highly criticized by the grand jury for its handling of the coronavirus. And partly that's a function of them responding not to public opinion, but in fact to those people who are highly mobilized. So let's just look, we're running out of time, but we'll move very quickly. The first question we asked is, whether the COVID-19 crisis was real, because there are a number of people who've been protesting this in Huntington Beach, saying it's a hoax, or at minimum, it's been blown out of proportion. And in fact, what we found is that most people feel that it is the real deal, and that only 17% felt it was exaggerated, and 83% felt it was a real threat. Then there are people who feel that, social distancing, standing 6 feet away, is the equivalent of communism. That's quite a charge. And we asked, well, was social distancing supported by most people? And overwhelmingly, 90% of the people we polled in 704 cases supported social distancing, and only a very small percentage said no, they didn't. And what about masks? This attractive lady is protesting that, wearing a mask is a horrible thing, and the no sign. But when we did the survey, 70% of the people said, almost 2 to 1, that no, it was okay to wear masks. And then finally, we asked, many people feel that the government, particularly Sacramento, has been, really over the top, and they have gone beyond the pale in terms of power. And they've said this response reminds them of socialism. In fact, this is the communist flag of China. And that's quite an assertion. And so we asked people, do you think government went over the top, and whether it went too far? And about a third, or 25%, said too far, but 73% said no, what government was doing was appropriate. And then we went about the economy. Mike, you want to take that?
Sure. So if we can go to the next slide, we asked some questions about the economy and the economic impact on individuals. This is a noteworthy finding. We asked individuals about the economic impact of the pandemic and the lockdown on them. And 87% stated that the pandemic had caused them either a moderate economic impact or no economic impact. So a vast, vast majority. And thinking about this and kind of analyzing these results, I think if there's one thing that this pandemic has really demonstrated, it's that these lockdowns, and with everything that we've dealt with during the past 14 months, it's really in California increased further the gap between the rich and the poor in the state. So, for example, those who have the privilege of being able to work from home and who have who work in an office and are able to just take everything and do the same work from home, there was much less of an economic hardship that these individuals might have felt. I think about my parents before they retired. They worked food service their entire lives. For those who come from kind of the working class sector, it was a much different story. And I would be curious if we were to ask this question in the Central Valley or in areas maybe that aren't as affluent as Orange County and the Bay Area. And my guess would be that these results would be much different. So that was our finding here. And on this one, if we go to the next slide, please, we asked about what's more important, containing the virus or reopening the economy. The majority of county residents believe that containing the virus is more important than rushing to reopen the economy. But note the very, very significant differences between Republicans and Democrats. 68% of Republicans believe reopening the economy is more important. 93% of Democrats believe containing the virus is more important. And 61% of those who do not identify with a political party believe containing the virus was more important. With many of these coronavirus related questions, we saw pretty stark divides between Democrats and Republicans. And in many of the other questions as well. We also asked a question about the reopening of schools, and this was another controversial issue. We've been making a lot of headlines the past 14 months, a lot of statewide and national headlines. The Orange County Board of Education last summer had this stance where they said, we recommend reopening schools with no mask guidelines. Here, the majority were in favor of reopening schools, but the key term there is provided the proper precautions are taken. So there was 56% support for reopening schools.
We're just finishing up now, just 2 more slides. The pandemic has been unusual in that the doctors who at the national level, Dr. Fauci, and locally, first Nicole Quick and then Clayton Chow, have been attacked. In our own county, Nicole Quick, the OC chief health officer, had to resign because there were death threats made against her. I mean, this was extraordinary, and people, as you see this side, hang Fauci. And this is unusual. And what we found is when we asked people, and we didn't know the people at the healthcare center, who do you trust? Well, we saw a pretty good divide between the professional medical people, the healthcare agency, that would be Nicole Quick, Clayton Chow, and that group, and Dr. Fauci, and then the politicians. So people trusted the professionals just as we would in our private lives, and the politicians less so. So our final conclusions are this, and we know we went over, but the COVID deniers, the anti-maskers, the anti-vaxxers, the noisy people do not represent Orange County. There is overwhelming support for government efforts to combat the virus. There has been a moderate economic hardship, I'd say bifurcated. Small group of people have suffered greatly, but a large number of people who've been able to convert, like Mike and I, to teaching on Zoom have done okay. Most people trust health professionals more than elected officials. We did find in virtually all the questions a strong partisan divide. Republicans are much more skeptical of everything than Democrats, and certainly more skeptical of government action. But on the one issue, most people believe that schools should reopen immediately. Well, we're going to stop there and turn it over to you, Sue.
Sure. Just one quick comment to add to what Fred just said. Fred and I, we argue California is not, it's purple county. It's a county that looks a lot more like the rest of the country today. It's no longer this outlier among it's no longer this conservative outlier among coastal California counties. It's purple county, and it looks much more like the rest of the United States. And there is this reasonable silent majority that believes in doing the right thing. It's just that the headlines tell us a different story. The headlines tend to go to Huntington Beach and Tito Ortiz and the Board of Education, but that does not represent Orange County. And our findings show this year after year when we conduct this research.
I guess we'll turn it over. If you have any questions for us, we're happy to take them.
Okay, thank you so much, Professors Moody and Smoller. I know that there are a lot of questions, and so I will turn this over right now to Pat Leftwich, who will ask those questions.
Okay, Jonathan did get us questions in. So the first one is, responses for your 2021 survey were gathered January 27th through February 15th.
Correct.
So in its politics section, one question asked if the presidential election was fair. Just one asked if it was fair to impeach Trump a second time. And no question specifically asked about the January 6th attack on the Capitol. If you were designing the questions today, May 20th, would you ask about other issues to glean Orange County residents' political profiles? Which other current issues do you think are now most important to ask about?
Well, great. One of the problems with surveys like this is, one, we are constrained by how much money we're able to get because the survey house charges us based on the length of the survey. And there's just so much time you can keep people on the phone. They just break off because they don't want to talk to you anymore. And we have to make, to get 700 responses, oh my God, 30,000 dialings. I mean, it's a big deal. It's not like you call up 1,000 people and you get 700 responses. So we're very much constrained. Sure, there are a lot of things that I wish we could have asked that we didn't. And that's part of why we think we need to be doing many more surveys because right now, I don't think the county spends a dime doing surveys like this. And I think they're extremely important.
And I would also just add, if Fred and I could create a new one from scratch today, I would just love to include a question about county residents' views toward having a proof of vaccination on your phone or with you, because I don't really think that 500 people who show up at a Board of Supervisors meeting, as was the case a week ago, I'm not sure that's representative of what I would say is a reasonable majority of county residents who don't see it as that outrageous.
Particularly since it was a voluntary program. Okay, next question.
Okay. Replies in your 2021 survey to political questions broken out by party affiliation, especially whether the presidential election was fair and on approval of Biden and Trump and Congress and right track, wrong track, almost exactly match reports by the most reliable major national polls recently and since January, especially this week, CBS, YouGov poll, Ipsos, and Gallup. So do you think Orange County residents' politics are very close to a microcosm of the nation as a whole?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mike, I'll let you take that. Yeah.
And the other thing about what's moving the needle, because in most of these questions, there's a pretty stark divide between Democratic and Republican responses, but what's moving the needle are the no party preference voters. And there's a very large no party preference segment in Orange County. And generally their views are consistent with Democratic views, at least in recent years.
Okay, and that was the next question. How did they lean, Democrat or Republican, the independent? Okay, let's see. Do you believe that the people who claim things like the election was stolen and other similar beliefs actually believe these things, or do they think they're supposed to believe them and want to believe them?
I don't know if our data allow us to weigh in on that. As a political scientist, I can tell you what the reports are that many elected people believe. Many people in Congress don't believe the election was stolen, but I think it's politically convenient to say it is. As for the people that we quizzed or that we surveyed, I don't know. It's a good question to ask.
I also don't know. I wonder openly if I think that one major contributor to this is just the differences in terms of how we all obtain news today, and that's very concerning. Where there during the Richard Nixon era, I mean, there were just the major evening news stations. People read the major paper. Fred and I have had this conversation several times. I don't think Nixon would have had to resign had Fox News existed in the 1970s, where there'd be a reliable network that would have defended him at all costs. So I think a big part of it is just where we tend to get our information from. I have a neighbor who believes believes that vaccines are ineffective and we shouldn't get them. And she gets all of her information from videos that she watches on Facebook. And it's very concerning in terms of this environment that we're in terms of how we get information.
Okay, it appears that many of the people who didn't want any precautions such as mask and distancing are the same people who refuse to or are hesitant to get vaccinated. How do you account for this?
Well, I don't know if you can make methodologically whether you can make that exact judgment, but I happen to believe it's true. Why aren't people getting vaccinated? Because they partly don't trust government, partly they think the vaccine will be ineffective. But I also think the fact it's kind of ironic. The vaccine was created at warp speed within a year. And the fact that it was created so quickly, I think scares some people off. Now, there are some people who just simply resent government and they'll never do it. But I think maybe that's 10%, but I think there's this other group of people who just need to be convinced, and we need public policies that speak to them in a way that raises their comfort level. But if I could, I think that's really the next research that we need to be doing, is to really inquire why people are opposed to getting the vaccine. I think it's a complicated question. Lots of different reasons for different people.
The New York Times published a phenomenal article on this 2 days ago, and the author broke it into 4 major areas in terms of why people don't get the vaccine. There are some who are simply waiting to see how things go when their neighbors get it and their friends get it. There's some for whom it's simply a cost issue. Maybe they're working, day and night and just don't have the ability to take time off work or perhaps recover from the side effects. And then, as Fred said, there are those who don't trust the government. And the largest percentage, 14%, according to the Times article, are people who simply don't see COVID as a threat and have downplayed this from the beginning as a threat. So that's be the best connection I could draw.
Okay. Sue, do you want to ask the question you have?
Sure. How do you see the chances for a win again by Cotty Petrie Norris, and also a possible win for another Democrat for Board of Supervisors?
We don't. Wait,
Do you have a crystal ball?
No, I mean, based on the survey work, these are competitive races, and the Bartlett race against Joe Kerr, if you want me to weigh in on that, who knew? I thought John Mollock was going to win the 2nd district against Katrina Foley. And so I was shocked by that victory. Cotty Petrie Norris, I would imagine, is, a formidable campaigner. And as she continues on in the assembly, it'll be more difficult to challenge her. But, those races are a long way off.
The other issue too, I think the registration advantage for Democrats is only going to grow between now and the next election. It's going to continue to expand. However, that said, you do have districts in Orange County that are pretty solid red still. So, for example, when Michelle Steele just beat Harley Ruda a year ago, that is the congressional district NOC that has the highest Republican registration advantage. She only beat him by 6,000 votes. And Ruda, of course, unseat Rohrabacher. And I would say that it didn't help it didn't help Ruda. The difference might have been there was an official from the Democratic Party who posted something sympathetic about Ho Chi Minh on his Facebook page. That literally could have been the difference of votes that led to the Steele victory. It's hard to say, but I never thought that we would see this rapidly gains that Democrats have made all the way from the school board level all the way up to Congress. And there are still going to be competitive races, but the advantage will only grow in my opinion.
The other thing is this, we have three political parties in Orange County, as we do nationally. We have the Democratic Party, we have the Republican Party, and we have the Trumplican Party. That is that half of the Republican Party that is aligned with Donald Trump. And I think a lot of this depends on whether our Orange County GOP continues to support President Trump or whether they break away. My view is the fact that Donald Trump was not convicted in the second impeachment trial literally was the best thing that ever happened to Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, because Donald Trump is very unpopular in our state and in Orange County. And since he is still tearing up the Republican Party, that this will bode well for Democrats. The Democrats, it seems to me, are focusing on actually getting stuff done, infrastructure, COVID relief, all of which are popular. And the Republicans are basically, spending a lot of time chewing each other up. And today's vote, there'll be a Senate vote which will trash the commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection and the commitment to retelling that lie that the election was bogus. Well, there's no evidence. This was a free and fair election. There was no fraud. There's no fraud in Orange County. Yet the Republicans continue to go down that route. And I think I think they're following Donald Trump off the diving board. And that's, I believe, unfortunate. We need two competitive political parties. And I don't think Trump is doing the GOP any service.
Okay. Do you think the GOP lack of concern about COVID is because it affects primarily groups they don't care about, the poor, the minorities, elderly, and the infirmed, who suck up Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid resources?
I think, I'll quote, I don't know the gentleman, but I think the Republican Party has simply become unmoored from the truth. And, if you're going to start going down the path that the election is a lie, that climate change isn't real, then you're going to just deny that COVID was a real crisis. So I think it's just this orientation to truth. Mike and I have been attacked and will be continued to be attacked for all sorts of reasons, because truth tellers, and that's what we think that's what we strive to do. That's what we're striving to do. Truth tellers are not popular these days. And so I think it's a combination of those things.
What do you think accounts for the movement away from Republicanism and towards Democratic viewpoints?
There isn't a movement. The Republicans are not becoming liberal Democrats or Democrats. That's not what's happening. What is happening is replacement. That is the people over 60, 65, 70 who are staunch Republicans, who they're exiting the electorate. They're either passing on or and I'm over 65, and or they're moving to Arizona. They're being replaced by younger, more moderate and liberal younger people, as well as minorities. So it's not that people's views are changing, it's that the people themselves are changing. That's what's going on here.
I would also just add, certainly the diversity component, as the United States is increasingly diverse. In California, roughly 29% of our residents were born outside of the United States. We have the largest, kind of the Ellis Island of 2021. It's the fact that I think that there's a lot of damage that Donald Trump is doing to the Republican Party nationally. I think that is somewhat similar to the damage that Pete Wilson did to the party statewide, where the Republican Party in statewide office is basically just irrelevant today. And I think that you could trace that back to Pete Wilson, Save Our State, Prop 187, et cetera. There was the exception with the Schwarzenegger years, but Schwarzenegger was more of kind of an outsider. And I would venture to guess that we'll see these kind of long-term ramifications in the aftermath of Trump.
Along the same lines as Trump's acquittal in impeachment trial was a good thing for Biden and Dems. Won't McConnell's obstructionism help the Dems' agenda?
Yes. Yes,
And especially getting Manchin to yield on ending the filibuster or greatly reforming it.
I think the current leadership in their efforts to pander to Donald Trump are, that's a very short-term strategy. And I'll go on record as saying that, political science has shown, and political experience shows, that the out party tends to do very well in the midterm. So if we elect a Republican and 2 years later, Democrats pick up seats in the House. The same is reverse. If the Democrat wins, then the Republican picks up seats. I think this 22 congressional election is going to be different. I do not think Republicans are going to pick up any seats. In fact, I think they may lose seats to Democrats, because the Republican Party, as we've known it doesn't exist anymore. It's a Trump-style party, and I think he is, like I said, walking them off the plank. And McConnell is part of that. Our own Kevin McCarthy is part of this. They're all over the place, and I think the electorate is becoming aware of it.
I have a question from one of our directors who has read Dr. Smoller's comments in the Voice of OC regarding redistricting, and being concerned with the lack of transparency and engagement by the OC Board of Supervisors. What can we do as a political organization to educate residents and encourage action?
Throw a fit. That this is ridiculous. In a democracy, as I said in the Voice of OC article, the people choose their elected leaders. The elected leaders do not choose the voters. Now, California statewide has a wonderful process in which the districts are drawn by an independent commission. And that has been the model for other states like Arizona. We need to adopt that. You have a group of people not connected in any way to politics, and they become the people who draw the districts. But we know that gerrymandering and playing around with district lines is an undemocratic way to gain public office. And so we need to move to a California-style independent district commission and take the redrawing of lines out of the hands of supervisors and their campaign aides. It is not good for a democracy, and your club should throw a fit, right? Speak up, write letters to the paper, march, complain, do whatever you can to make your voices heard.
Voice of OC is a very, very good tool as well. I mean, a community op-ed for Voice of OC, that they read that. But yeah, I agree. It's pretty outrageous.
I hope your club will take our survey and go to the Board of Supervisors meeting and say something to the effect of, how dare you, can a perfectly reasonable proposal for a vaccine status to be put online, which the business community supports. We just did a panel with Lucy Dunn, and she made those comments. And based on the fact that a noisy minority is upset. Well, that's not how you make public policy. And if they don't like our survey, let them do another one, a professional survey. But the point is that you don't make that. They tabled that policy, and that is crossing the line. They're now yielding to a noisy group of people, and that is not how you. We lost 5,000 people are dead, 250,000 cases. You don't make policy based on the fact that a bunch of noisy people, extremists, marginal people are filling your boardroom. That's not how you make good public policy.
Okay. I heard a caller on talk radio stating he wanted his children to get smallpox because it isn't serious and all vaccinations are phony and not needed. Smallpox and polio are not serious. Do your surveys indicate why people would think that? And is there a way to reason with people who do believe this?
I know I don't want to take up your whole meeting here. There's a group of people that cannot be reasoned with, but not everybody who opposes a vaccine is a wingnut. And so I don't know what percentage of people are completely unreasonable. but I would suggest that it's not the majority of them, and that that we should always try to speak with the calmly and understand where people are coming from. You may remember, I don't want to date myself, but in the 50s, there was a terrible scandal, I think it was in Japan, thalidomide, where these women took a drug, a sedative, and my God, there were these enormous birth defects. And, you know, I think that becomes part of the culture. We saw the Tuskegee experiments where people who had syphilis were allowed to die and suffer because they were being given shots that had placebos. So there's good reason for people to be skeptical. And I understand that. And I think we just have to figure out a way to reach the more reasonable people. I don't know how you deal with, Mike mentioned Fox News. I mean, here is a network with no integrity whatsoever, who knows darn well that they are peddling untruths. They know this. They know the election was fair. They know COVID is real. They know that Dr. Fauci is not, you know, an evil man. And they deliberately, for ratings, go on and they peddle this garbage, and people watch it and they act accordingly. I still believe that if the so-called silent majority speaks up, and the way to do that is to get the policy changed with the Board of Supervisors to say, don't make your policies based on noisy people. And that's the key, is the policy. That's important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm afraid we're going to have to end right now. And I really want to thank both of you for taking the time from your busy schedules. I certainly hope that you are correct about your prognosis for the 2022 congressional elections. And we certainly will take to heart your advice to make a lot of noise about the redistricting. And I'm counting on Mary Rabando, who's our voter reg and postcard director, to take the lead on that, as that was her question. And perhaps we can get something done about redistricting in Orange County.
Writing opinion piece for Voice of OC, like Mike said.
Okay.
All right.
It's important. It's important for us to influence the things that we can, rather than worrying about a lot of national issues where we have much less input.
Go back to the quote that started today's session. You know, everything has to be faced, and sometimes you won't be successful, but you got to face it. Anyway, we've taken up your whole hour. Please invite us back. We'd love to come. And but I know we've gone well past our allotted time.
No, you haven't. We're still good. Okay. And I'd like to give Mike a last chance to say something, just to say thank you, goodbye.
Just really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate what you all do as citizens to make our county a better place. As somebody who's been here my whole life, and I'm raising, my wife and I are raising our little 6-year-old boy here. Just want to sincerely thank you for your civic engagement and for having us. So would love to come back anytime.
Thank you so much to both of you. I would like to thank Pat Leftwich for asking the questions and doing the Zoom. I'd like to thank Alan Feldman for keeping time. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and like to thank the people who posed the excellent questions. Our speakers are usually very surprised by the level of sophistication of questions from the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. And we are very proud of the results that we get in Laguna Woods, because the Democrats did win in the last election in Laguna Woods, and that is at least in part due to our efforts. Thank you all for joining in and for being here and watching this program today. And we look forward to seeing you next month, when we will have Dr. Thomas Parham, who is the president of CSU Dominguez Hills. And he will be talking to us on a variety of topics, but including ethnic studies, curriculum, at least on the college level. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.